Welcome into CBS News 24/7. I'm Juliette Goodrich. We're watching Wall Street as President Trump faces new questions over a temporary tariff exemption on high-tech devices coming from China. So we're live at the White House. Plus, a mother grabs her baby and runs after a powerful earthquake jolts Southern California. And we are learning more about the man accused of setting fire to the governor's home in Pennsylvania. You're watching CBS News 24/7. All right, the closing bell rang just moments ago as investors digest the latest twists and turns from President Trump's tariff agenda. The Dow is up. So let's take a look at our interactive stock market heat map. This is brought to you by FinViz. It shows the top 500 stocks. You can see all of them in the green, some of them in the red. Apple landing in the green today, boosted by the news the White House will exclude smartphones and computers from Trump's tariffs on China. And some automakers also made gains after the president hinted he might make an exception for them as well. So let's take a listen to that.
I'm looking at something to help some of the car companies where they're switching to parts that were made in Canada, Mexico, and other places, and they need a little bit of time because they're going to make them here, but they need a little bit of time. So I'm talking about things like that.
What about any Apple products, other cell phones?
Look, I'm a very flexible person. I don't change my mind, but I'm flexible. And you have to be. You just can't have a wall and you'll only go. No, sometimes you have to go around it, under it, or above it. There'll be maybe things coming up. I speak to Tim Cook. I helped Tim Cook recently, and that whole business. I don't want to hurt anybody, but the end result is we're going to get to the position of greatness for our country.
CBS News Money Watch correspondent Kelly O'Grady joining us now to help us understand these tariffs. I know that you're keeping a scorecard because it is changing. And it's interesting the president using the word flexible, too. That's kind of a key word to investors.
Oh, absolutely. I think investors like to hear the word flexible instead of that the president would hold a hard line. But I will tell you, Jules, from the folks that I'm talking to, they need to see more proof in the pudding for this rally to continue going. But you mentioned a scorecard, so just kind of running through where the tariffs stand. We still have the 25% tariff on sectors like steel and aluminum and automobiles. We've still got the 25% tariff on goods coming from Canada and Mexico that are not covered by that trade agreement between those three countries. We've still got the 10% tariff on most nations. That is a blanket tariff. And of course, that is in place while we have a 90-day pause on the White House's reciprocal tariffs on other countries. And then finally, we've got China. So 145% tariff across the board. That is 125% on top of the original 20%. I'm throwing a lot of numbers at you. Sort of the big key factor today that spurred that rally in the markets was this question of tech products that would be exempt, not from the tariffs entirely. You'd still have a 20% tariff on those coming from China, those iPhones. But really, I mean, you mentioned Apple, and I was talking to a few analysts, and they said, look, if you have Apple products being subject to a 20% tariff instead of a 145% tariff, it's good news. And that's why you saw the stock rally. I think it was up 2.2% to finish the end of the day. But still, Jules, I mean, I just ran through a lot of numbers. There's still a lot of uncertainty because we know that things are changing minute by minute when it comes to these tariffs.
Yeah, that's so true. So the president is hoping these tariffs move manufacturing to the U.S. today. So let's talk about AI giant NVIDIA unveiling plans to do just that. So what can you tell us?
Okay, so this was a big announcement. NVIDIA came out this morning. They are going to spend $500 billion with a number of manufacturing partnerships over the next 4 years to bring AI infrastructure here to the U.S. And they also announced for the first time that they are looking to fully manufacture their AI supercomputers in the U.S. That is the first time that we have heard that from them. A couple of other announcements, sort of things that we already knew that were happening, but they just kind of gave an update on them. One example would be that they've started to manufacture their Blackwell chip. That's essentially their flagship semiconductor chip in their facility that they work with TSMC in Phoenix. So look, all in all, the president was touting this as an example of how tariffs will incentivize companies to bring manufacturing here. It wasn't a completely new announcement, but just shows their commitment to moving forward with some of those plans, Jules.
All right, I've got one more for you before we let you go. We're getting new data on how people are really feeling about the labor market and the economy. So what are you hearing?
Okay, so two big things that came out today. The first is a survey from the New York Federal Reserve, and it found that folks are not feeling great about the labor market. So we saw 44% of people think that the unemployment rate will be higher next year than it is now. And that's the highest reading that we've actually seen since April 2020. And of course, that's significant because that was right at the beginning of the pandemic when all of that uncertainty and all those layoffs were happening. The second piece of data that we got, another survey of CEOs, okay, from this company chief or the survey chief executive, 62% of those surveyed think that we will be in a recession or an economic downturn within the next 6 months. Why is that important? That is up significantly from last month when the reading was under 50%. So again, doesn't mean it's going to happen, but it does underscore the uncertainty and concern that people feel, Jules.
All right, Kelly O'Grady. Kelly, thank you. Well, President Trump hosted Salvadoran President Nayib Bukele today at the White House. Their partnership has been critical to the Trump administration's deportation operation. Since March, El Salvador has accepted more than 200 prisoners, all immigrants arrested in the U.S., to the notorious mega prison. So this includes Kilmar Abrego Garcia, a man the Trump administration admitted was wrongfully deported. The Supreme Court ordered the Trump administration facilitate his return to the U.S. In an exchange at the White House today, Homeland Security Advisor Stephen Miller said the administration can't do that. El Salvador's president also said he couldn't return Abrego Garcia.
To the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said the district court order was unlawful and its main components were reversed 9-0 unanimously, stating clearly that neither Secretary of State nor the president could be compelled by anybody to forcibly retrieve a citizen of El Salvador from El Salvador, who again is a member of MS-13, which, as I'm sure you understand, rapes little girls, murders women, murders children, is engaged in the most barbaric activities in the world. And I can promise you, if he was your neighbor, you would move right away.
So you don't plan
But
to
the
ask for
Supreme
anyone
Court's
to get him
asking
back?
to.
And
that-
what was the ruling
that your
in the Supreme Court, Steve? Was it 9-0?
Yes, there's a 9-0
In our favor.
in our favor against the district court ruling, saying that no district court has the power to compel the foreign policy function of the United States. As Pam said, the ruling solely stated that if this individual at El Salvador's sole discretion was sent back to our country, that we could deport him a second time.
Well,
No version of this legally ends up with him ever living here because he is a citizen of El Salvador. That is the president of El Salvador. Your questions about it, per the court, can only be directed to him.
I asked
¿Usted lo
President
liberaría,
Bukele, what is your,
Presidente
can President Bukele weigh in on this? Do you plan to return him?
Well, I'm supposed to have suggested that I smuggle a terrorist into the United States, right?
It's always the other.
How can I smuggle? How can I return him to the United States? Like, I smuggle him into the United States, or what do I do? Of course, I'm not going to do it. It's like, I mean, the question is preposterous. How can I smuggle a terrorist into the United States? I don't have the power to return him to the United States.
All right, CBS News White House reporter Willie James Inman is live outside the White House to break this down. So, Willie, the Trump administration was asked to facilitate his return, but based on what we just heard, what are the efforts now?
Hey there, Juliet. Good to be with you on this Monday afternoon. Well, it certainly looks like the White House isn't moving any closer to bringing Abrego Garcia back to the United States based on what we heard there in that Oval Office exchange. Also note over the weekend, for the first time, the Department of Justice in a couple of court filings. One, they acknowledged that Abrego Garcia was alive and secure. Of course, we know that he is in El Salvador in CICOT, that supermax prison there in that country. We also learned via court filings that the government is arguing that courts cannot compel the U.S. to extradite or go in and get Abrego Garcia, essentially because this has to do with foreign policy. We, of course, know that the Trump administration moved forward with deporting Abrego Garcia despite a judge's order that he be protected from those deportation proceedings, previously. But nonetheless, he he is now in El Salvador. The United States government says that they can facilitate that return. For instance, if El Salvador were to give him back over to the American government. And Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, weighed in on this. She mentioned that facilitating would mean providing a plane for his transportation back here to the United States. But as you saw there, the president of El Salvador weighing in on this, saying essentially that he doesn't want to release a terrorist back into the United States. He doesn't want to do so in terms of releasing Abrego Garcia within El Salvador as well. So this is looking more and more like the Trump administration will not act to bring Abrego Garcia back to the United States.
So President Trump has said in the past he'd consider sending American criminals to that prison in El Salvador. So what are we hearing now?
Yeah, this certainly perhaps raised some eyebrows across Washington, especially with Democrats. As you mentioned, this isn't the first time that the president has floated this idea. But just take a listen to what he said a little bit earlier in the Oval Office.
They're great facilities, very strong facilities, and they don't play games. I'd like to go a step further. I mean, I said it to Pam. I don't know what the laws are. We always have to obey the laws, but we also have homegrown criminals that push people into subways, that hit elderly ladies on the back of the head with a baseball bat when they're not looking, that are absolute monsters. I'd like to include them in the group of people to get them out of the country, but you'll have to be looking at the laws on that.
Now, what the president is talking about here is potentially deporting or sending American citizens or naturalized American citizens who are violent criminals to a place like El Salvador. That would certainly raise constitutional questions, civil liberties questions, but the president asking his administration, members of his administration, I should note, including the Attorney General and Stephen Miller there, to look into this. But if the White House makes this particular move, it would certainly run into legal challenges down the road, though, Juliet.
All right, CBS News White House reporter Willie James Inman, thank you so much. New video shows the scary moment a strong earthquake rattles Southern California. Next, you're watching CBS News 24/7. An earthquake jolted Southern California today. The magnitude 5.2 quake hit San Diego County near the mountain town of Julian. The quake was felt dozens of miles away from the epicenter. That's video from inside a home. It shows the moment a mother grabbed her baby and then ran to safety. CBS News Los Angeles has been following the story. Here's some of their coverage from earlier today.
This is video from a liquor store called Mountain Spirit Liquor in Julian. You can see this is an example. I'm sure it happened all over that community of things being knocked off shelves. In this case, it was bottles of liquor all over the floor. So there's going to be some cleanup here. But again, no injuries reported in Julian. We are hearing from other people that lived in the area as well. They have some cracks in their walls and ceilings. Certainly, this is a common thing for homes in Southern California. I doubt there's virtually a home anywhere in Southern California that doesn't have some kind of cracks or small cracks in their foundations from earthquakes like this. But LA County Fire, LA City Fire, and San Diego County Fire so far reporting no reports of any injuries, which is great. Amy, the governor, has been briefed on this earthquake. He has activated the governor's Office of Emergency Services to work with any local authorities that need any help. And one note that I want to say, Orange County Train Line 608, which is that train line that runs between San Clemente and Orange County right along the beach. Right now, that train track is closed, because that is right there on the shore, and at times there has been problems with either sand or rocks during earthquakes getting on those train tracks, so they've suspended service to walk those train tracks to make sure there's nothing on the tracks from this earthquake. I'll keep monitoring this and let you know if anything changes here, but thankfully this may just be an earthquake that we all felt, didn't really experience any damage or injuries, which is good news here in Southern California.
A judge in Vermont held a hearing for Rumeysa Ozturk, an international student the Trump administration has accused of being a Hamas supporter. Katrina Kaufman has the latest.
Attorneys for Tufts student Rumeysa Ozturk argued in court this morning that she should be released from a detention facility in Louisiana and that her case should be moved to Vermont. Ozturk's attorneys further argued that she should be let out on bail. They said she's in no way a flight risk. All she wants to do is return to Tufts to continue her studies there. Her lawyers also pointed out that it is very unusual for an individual to be detained in a visa revocation case or to even be served with a removal notice in the first place. The government argued that this case should be dismissed altogether. They say that it was filed in the wrong venue. It should have been filed in Louisiana, where Ozturk is being confined. Instead, it was filed in Vermont. However, they also admitted that they did not reveal to Ozturk's attorney where she was when the case was filed. There's also information that has recently come to light. The Washington Post reported that they obtained information from a memo that said a State Department office failed to find evidence tying Ozturk to anti-Semitism or terrorism related to activities, and that was just days before her arrest by ICE. There will be a hearing in Ozturk's immigration case on Wednesday in Louisiana. Back to you.
Our map now takes us to Nashville, Tennessee, where protesters marched to the state capitol building. They're calling on lawmakers to vote down a bill that would allow school districts to unenroll undocumented students or charge them tuition. CBS News correspondent Nicole Valdez has more.
There are about 100 people, if not more, here at a park just about a block away or so from the Tennessee State Capitol. They plan to start marching here shortly, really in opposition of this bill. So many have really spoken out against since its inception several months ago. I'll give you a little bit of a view here of what we're seeing, because there are dozens of families here really just finding the words to describe a bill that so many really believe is controversial and in some cases discriminatory. Again, what this bill would do if passed is it would allow school districts to, first off, check the immigration status of students as they look to enroll into public schools. If they're not able to provide any sort of documentation that shows that they are either U.S. citizens or in the process of becoming U.S. citizens, that school district would have the option to either deny their enrollment or simply look to charge them tuition. Now, the Republicans who are in favor of this, and many of the supporters of this bill, I'll pause right there because I know you can hear this crowd getting ready to march, and ahead of it here, leading that march, several children who are one of many speaking out against this bill. You'll notice that they're all wearing graduation caps. Just a statement here, right? Excuse me. Just a statement here to the opposition against this bill for so many families, minority families here in the state of Tennessee. So the Republicans who, again, are supportive of this bill say this is a cost-saving measure for the state to offer those school districts. They say that many of these school districts pay more in order to provide the necessary education for some of these students. However, of course, Democrats who oppose this feel like this is just really an argument about our immigration system that is being taken at the state level and at the school level. And there are many who have argued sort of its attempt here to try to challenge a 1982 Supreme Court ruling, Plyler versus Doe, that once really argued and gave students a right to education despite their immigration status. So as you see here, guys, we're getting ready to see this march just begin. Definitely a conversation that so many are trying to decide how to move forward with. This bill has already passed the state house, or rather the state senate here in Tennessee. We could see this enter the state house as soon as by the end of this month.
Nicole Valdez. On to Wisconsin now, where the FBI says a teenager charged with killing his parents also planned to assassinate President Trump and overthrow the government. A newly unsealed federal warrant accuses 17-year-old Nikita Kossoff of aligning himself with extremist anti-Semitic ideology. The FBI says he wrote a manifesto calling for the president's assassination. In court, prosecutors say officers also searched his cell phone.
He's been speaking with someone in Russian about moving to Ukraine after committing these crimes. So the state is concerned that he's a flight risk if he is ever released.
Police say the teen fatally shot his parents at their home in February and left their bodies for weeks before fleeing with stolen cash. The teen is expected to enter a plea next month. In New York, the company involved in the deadly helicopter crash on the Hudson River is shutting down operations immediately. That's the word from the FAA. The pilot and a family of 5 tourists were killed when the chopper went down near Lower Manhattan last Thursday. The FAA is launching an immediate review of the tour company's license and safety record. Still no word on what caused the crash. The CEO says the company will help investigators and is, quote, grieving the tragic loss of life. Staying in New York, we're learning more about a small plane crash that left 6 people dead. Among them, Corinna Groff, a former MIT soccer player, once named the NCAA Woman of the Year. Groff, some of her family members, and her boyfriend were heading to a Passover celebration for the weekend when the plane went down. It happened Saturday in an open field in the town of Copiague, about 50 miles outside of Albany. Their flight left Westchester County Airport in White Plains and was scheduled to land at the Columbia County Airport in Hudson. No word yet on what caused the crash. A new study published in JAMA Internal Medicine estimates that 103,000 radiation-induced cancers are projected to result from CT exams done in 2023. Researchers say CT-associated cancer could eventually account for 5% of all new yearly cancer diagnoses if current practices continue. Now, this isn't the first time the issue of CT scans in cancer was raised. In 2015, Consumer Reports found up to 1/3 of CT scans could be unnecessary, exposing patients to unneeded radiation. A Stanford professor with terminal cancer is using his experience to educate others. CBS News 24/7 anchor Elizabeth Cook reports he's teaching a class on dying from lung cancer as he battles a terminal diagnosis of the disease.
Chemotherapy every 3 weeks.
Dr. Bryant Lynn has been a physician and a professor at Stanford University for almost 2 decades. But this time, he's not only the teacher, he's also the subject.
I'm still getting chemotherapy every 3 weeks.
In 2024, Dr. Lynn was battling a bad cough for months. A CT scan revealed non-small cell adenocarcinoma, never smoker lung cancer.
I ended up having stage 4, which is the most advanced stage.
The news was a dose of cruel irony. Dr. Lin co-founded the Center for Asian Health Research and Education.
One of our priority areas is lung cancer in people who have never smoked because it disproportionately affects Asians and particularly Asian women.
Within weeks, Dr. Lin was in a chemotherapy infusion chair, receiving the same treatment he counseled his patients and students on for years. It was here that he saw an opportunity. The class is called From Diagnosis to Dialogue, a doctor's real-time battle with cancer.
Deal with a lot of the ethical considerations.
Isabella Hefferman was one of the lucky ones to get a seat.
I was just really in awe in how well he's able to discuss this and just the bravery.
The 10-week course covers the entire spectrum of cancer, as seen through the eyes of someone who is living it.
And some patients don't want to engage. They don't necessarily want to know all these details.
Each week, a new topic and guest lecturer.
Heart disease and cancer are the leading causes of death in the United States. So this is going to impact somebody you know, maybe yourself.
Dr. Lin plans to teach his class for as long as he can. The syllabus, like his cancer journey, may change, but his mission remains the same. Elizabeth Cook, CBS News, Bay Area.
Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg takes the stand in the company's historic antitrust trial next. You're watching CBS News 24/7. Pennsylvania now, where a man was charged with setting the governor's mansion on fire. Governor Josh Shapiro and his family had to evacuate in the middle of the night. The man accused of starting the fire, Cody Ballmer, told police he harbored a hatred towards Shapiro. He was charged with criminal homicide, terrorism, aggravated arson, aggravated assault, and burglary. His arraignment hearing is expected to start in just a few minutes. So let's go to our breaking news correspondent, Chanel Call, in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, with the latest. So, Chanel, what do we know about the crime?
Well, we're live for you just outside the governor's mansion this hour, and we can tell you 38-year-old Cody Bomber actually climbed this fence behind me, jumped over it, and that's how he broke into the mansion sometime around 2 o'clock on Sunday morning, and he started a fire. Governor Shapiro says he and his family, they were sleeping when this happened, and they were woken up by police who were banging on the door, telling them they needed to evacuate right away. Emergency crews, Jules, arrived on scene. They were able to take care of that fire, but there is so much damage on the south side of the building. You can see in some of the images we've been showing you all day just how severe the damage was inside the state dining room. And the timing here is really important to mention as well. This fire took place at around 2 in the morning, but hours before that, Governor Shapiro is hosting a dinner for the start of Passover with some family and other guests in that state dining room. You mentioned some of the charges that Bomber is now facing. This is really serious. We're talking about terrorism, aggravated arson, and attempted homicide.
Yeah, very serious charges. And then not to mention, you spoke to the fire chief, right? So what did he have to say about this?
Yeah, he called the situation surreal, pulling up to the governor's mansion for what he described to be a firebomb situation. He also called this an act of domestic terrorism. Listen.
The Molotov cocktail is no different than a gun, right? When I got that Molotov cocktail in my hand, I know at the end of the day, I'm going to create damage, destruction, and probably going through the terrorist's mind was, I want to kill somebody, right? So it's no different than that gun when I'm holding somebody up to steal their money, right? I know what the outcome could potentially be. And I think that's the surreal part of it, that there can be that much hatred pent up in somebody that they're able to take out that anger in such a way.
And, you know, we're also learning more about the suspect as the hours go by, Jules. We now know that he did have a limited criminal history. And CBS News also spoke to Cody Bomber's mother, and she said that her son suffered from some mental health issues. She said he recently was off his medications, and that she tried to report him, tried to get him help, I should say, in the last week, that she tried to phone police 4 times, but to no avail. Also want to mention that he wasn't supposed to be arraigned today. You said this off the top, that this will happen in just moments. But earlier today, state police had told me that the arraignment wasn't going to take place today because he was seeking some medical care at a hospital, and that wouldn't happen until he was released from a doctor's care. We now know that arraignment is set to happen here in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania at 5 o'clock today.
All right, Chanel Call. Chanel, thank you. The Justice Department says it has criminally charged a man accused of carrying out 2 recent arson attacks. The first was at a Tesla dealership February 9th. The second was at the New Mexico Republican Party headquarters on March 30th. The DOJ linked Jameson Wagner to the fires through surveillance footage of the white Hyundai Accent. ATF raided Wagner's home Saturday and found fire-starting devices and even spray paint. He's charged with 2 counts of malicious damage or destruction of property by fire. We are following a face-off in court between social media giant Meta, the Federal Trade Commission. Today marks day 1 of Meta's antitrust trial. The parent company of Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp is fighting to keep the FTC from breaking up the company. So let's bring in tech journalist Yasmin Khorram to break this all down. Tell us what this lawsuit is about and what is at stake. It's a big one.
This is big news, and it has a lot of implications for big tech. For Meta, this is an existential crisis. If it's forced to divest Instagram and WhatsApp, in the U.S. alone, more than half of its U.S. ad revenue comes from Instagram. That would be gone. And while Facebook does well around the world, here in the U.S., not so much. People my age and younger aren't really on Facebook. We're on Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, all of that. So let's look at the case. The government says that instead of competing with Instagram and WhatsApp, Facebook said, let's just buy it. And if you're a fan of the government, you could argue that that is true. Facebook certainly has the capital to do that. And Facebook at one point actually tried to buy Snapchat as well. Snapchat rejected that offer. Now, if you're a fan of Meta, Meta says that this isn't called competition, this is called survival. Look at the world we live in right now. The rise of TikTok, the rise of Snapchat. We needed something in our arsenal so we could compete. This is not a cut and dry case. The FTC has the burden of proof. Whatever this judge decides is going to have huge implications on big tech and on M&A moving forward.
Yeah, let's talk about implications. If Meta loses the case, what happens?
It's going to be complicated. They would have to divest Instagram and WhatsApp. I'm told that's a lengthy, complicated process. And the founders of those two companies no longer work at Meta. So interested to see what happens there. Possibly they may return if that happens. But this is really going to signal how President Trump and his administration plan to handle big tech. And in terms of booking a prize fight straight out of the gate, you couldn't have asked for a bigger case. Instagram and WhatsApp, when it comes to consumer products, some of the biggest out there.
Okay, so now I understand today CEO Mark Zuckerberg, he's on the stand. Is that right? So what is he saying?
He is on the stand. He's the star witness. He's the first one the FTC called. He is going through old emails talking about Facebook's evolution. But if we really look at his own evolution, he has bent over backwards, cozied up to the Trump administration since inauguration. He donated to inauguration $1 million. He's been spotted at the White House. He purchased a home near the White House. We've seen him really roll back all of those left-leaning Meta policies since President Trump took office. Now, will all of that pay off? I don't know. He's facing the FTC right now, so it seems pretty one-sided. But we'll see what tomorrow brings.
All right. Thank you for your reporting on that, Yasmin. And also, you can find more of Yasmin's reporting on her new Substack, The Y-Axis. So you can check it out at yasmincorum.substack.com. Is that right?
That's right.
And it's free.
It's free, yes. There's a paid subscription, but I'll be writing about this trial and much more happening in Silicon Valley.
Okay, we'll take it. Thank you so much, Yasmin. All right, Blue Origin's first all-women crew blasts off to space. We're going to hear from the crew, including our very own Gayle King, on what it was like. Next, you're watching CBS News 24/7.
4, command engine start, 2, 1,
Wow, point of pride for all of us here at CBS News as CBS Morning's Gayle King rocketed into space. Blue Origin's Shepard spacecraft lifted off this morning carrying an all-female crew. The group spent about 4 minutes in microgravity at the peak of their flight. Take a look.
Take us space!
Gayle got to experience what it feels like to float out of her seat and looked at the world from a whole new perspective. After a successful landing, she said the words "welcome home" had never hit so hard.
I just have to have a moment with the ground. Let me just appreciate the ground for just a second. Thank you, Jesus.
Gayle King spoke about her mindset going into this journey, a mix of anxiousness and fear, while at the same time feeling secure and determined.
I want to go in this thinking that I'm going to return with all my body parts, and that I can do everything that I said I wanted to do. But you can't help on some level think about it.
Sure.
And I'm not a risk taker, but I do believe when a mission is this big and you're working with the company that you know, I mean, I can't tell you how safe I felt with these people here. That's what I'm trying to say. It's so much bigger than us sitting on this stage. We all know that. This is great and wonderful, but we all know it's so much bigger than what we just did today, and bigger than all of us.
CBS News senior correspondent Mark Strassman joining us now near the launch site in West Texas. So walk us through the launch.
I tell you, Jules, if anybody involved with this day had drawn up a day, that it could not have been more perfect. I mean, from the astronauts to the company executives, I mean, everything went exactly as they drew it up. The weather was perfect. The launch was right on time. Everything from liftoff to touchdown was just as they draw it up in the book. I mean, it was really something special. And so when the astronauts came back, a combination of grateful and giddy about their experience, it was really no surprise. I mean, they really had the best possible experience that you could have, given what the challenges are in these up and down flights that only last about 10 minutes.
Yeah, that's what I find fascinating. So it's 11 minutes round trip, and then they had those 4 minutes up there to explore and see what was there, right?
Exactly. About 2 minutes and 40 seconds after launch, the capsule separates from the rocket. At that point, they can unbuckle their seatbelts and they start experiencing microgravity. They're about 45 miles up, and they have the next 3.5 minutes or so to float around the capsule, look out the window, admire the view, take it all in. And that, of course, is the highlight of the trip for most people who go up in these capsules. And so that is essentially the experience that Gayle King had among others today. I talked to her afterwards, and she was definitely proud of what she had accomplished because she was so scared stepping into that capsule, and yet she came back so grateful for the experience. I'm not saying she wants to do it again anytime soon, but I'm telling you, Jules, that she really was struck by just how different and mind-altering a moment in somebody's life can be, and that's the kind of moment she had today.
Yeah, mission accomplished. She'll think about it over and over for the rest of her life and share her experience. Okay, so a lot of people are calling this the dawn of the space tourism industry. We know that there were a lot of people watching this. Oprah was there, the Kardashians. So what are you hearing from people there?
Well, the issue here is exclusivity because of the price tag, right? It's the Oprahs and the Kardashians of the world who can afford this kind of experience if they want it. It's funny, I asked Oprah Winfrey today, so did she want to go to space, and she said no, incidentally. But clearly, I mean, for instance, Virgin Galactic, the price tag is now up to $600,000. Blue Origin, a privately held company, doesn't release its price list, but it's believed to be in the same basic ballpark. So you can see right away, most people can't begin to approach that as a possible life experience. And until the price does come down, and that's not likely to happen anytime soon, it will have this reputation of being something that only rich people can afford, rich people and celebrities. And what Blue Origin will say in response is, yes, but the more launches we have, the more we get into a regular rhythm or cadence of launches, the price will begin to come down. Maybe not low enough ever for most people to afford it, but certainly low enough for more people to afford it.
Well, picture perfect day. Mark Strassman. Mark, thank you so much. All right, the Ohio State football team is at the White House today celebrating the Buckeyes' national championship win. So moments ago, the White House pool cameras captured a serious fumble. Take a look. Trump was presented with a Buckeyes jersey with his name and presidential number 47 on the back. Meanwhile, a new CBS News poll finds 75% of Americans are concerned President Trump's tariffs will raise prices, at least in the short term. CBS News Executive Director of Elections and Surveys, Anthony Salvato, has more for us.
In our CBS News polling, when we look at how Americans are gauging the impact of Donald Trump's trade and tariff policies after a tumultuous week on Wall Street, a lot of it comes down to what they see as the goals and what they see as the time frame for judging it. Now, here's what I mean. In the immediate, a lot of Americans think that tariffs are going to raise prices. You see this big 3/4 who say it's going to do that at least in the short term, and plenty think it's that in the long term, too. Well, Americans are sensitive to that because for years they've been telling us that inflation and prices are top concerns for them. And then there's this movement we see in more Americans saying that they think the president's policies are making them financially worse off. It's not just about that increase, but think about expectations, too. At the start of the president's term, a lot more Americans said that they thought the president's policies would make them financially better off. So that's a contrast as well. But let's talk about the time frame that the the Republicans, the president's political base, is giving for this because it's much longer than many others in the public. You see Republicans saying it's going to take at least a few months, if not a year or longer, to gauge whether it has an effect. So that patience, then, where do they think it's going to pay off? They think it's going to pay off in manufacturing jobs. Here's the partisan splits on that, and you see 85% of Republicans think eventually those policies are going to add jobs. And this, for most folks, including for many Republicans, they believe that the president is using trade and tariff policy now as negotiations, but will remove, they believe, the tariffs later rather than keep them on permanently. So that's how both the goals and the time frame of judging all this plays out.
A roller coaster final round at the Masters, the emotional ending for Rory McIlroy, and what this all means to him. Next. You're watching CBS News 24/7. "34 people are dead and more than 100 are hurt after a Russian strike on Ukraine. Officials say the 2 ballistic missiles hit as people gathered to celebrate Palm Sunday. This comes a day after Russia and Ukraine's diplomats accused each other of violating a tentative deal to pause strikes on energy infrastructure. President Vladimir Zelensky is calling for a global response to the attack. Zelensky also opened up about the war during an interview with 60 Minutes. The United States was leading NATO in arming Ukraine and isolating Russia, but that changed when President Trump took office. President Zelensky told 60 Minutes reporter Scott Pelley that he invites President Trump to see the destruction in Ukraine.
We want you to come, and I think to come and to see. You think you understand what's going on here. Okay, we respect your position. You understand. But please, before any kind of decisions, any kind of formats of negotiations, come to see people, civilians, warriors, hospitals, churches, children, destroyed or dead. Come, look, and then let's move with a plan how to finish the war. You will understand with whom you have a deal. You will understand what Putin did, and we will not prepare anything. It will not be theater with preparing actors in the streets and etc. We don't do this. We don't need it. You can go exactly where you want in any city which been under attacks. What I said to them, just to come and to understand.
Since the war broke out, a number of world leaders, including former President Joe Biden, have visited Ukraine. Back here in the United States, golfer Rory McIlroy is Masters champion after a classic and emotional final round of the tournament in Augusta, Georgia. It didn't come without some drama for the 35-year-old from Northern Ireland. At one point, he had a 5-shot lead in the final round, but he turned what could have been a major collapse into a sudden death playoff win against Justin Rose. McIlroy spoke about what this all means to him.
Look, it's a dream come true. I've dreamt about that moment for as long as I can remember. I mentioned it out in the prize ceremony, but watching Tiger here in 1997 do what he did and winning his first green jacket, I think that inspired so many of my generation to want to emulate what he did.
McIlroy now takes his place in golf history as the 6th player to claim the career Grand Slam. America Decides with Major Garrett is next with the latest on the Maryland man mistakenly deported to El Salvador. You're watching CBS News 24/7.